All right. Awesome. Thanks for joining me, Ramon. Appreciate you jumping on, and love what you're doing with your podcast, and we'll jump into that a bit. But man, tell me a little bit about yourself. What was your dad's story like?
My dad's story is, well, early on, I have 5 children. So
Okay.
um I have an older daughter, oldest daughter, and then I have a older son who's 28 right
Hmm.
now. And basically with him, I was like a single dad. So that was, something that I had to really get adjusted to because I was pretty young and I wanted to have fun. I wanted to go out and party and stuff
Yeah.
like that, but now I couldn't do that. I had to take care of him, and I don't regret it at all. But
Hmm.
that was just an adjustment. That was a serious adjustment, and then I believe almost 9 years ago I got married to my wife now, and we have 2 younger children. So
Awesome.
yeah, and Carter is the one that I do the podcast with. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice. Nice. Yeah. We'll jump into that in a bit. But tell me, you have 5 kids. What does being a dad mean to you?
it means everything. It's the thing to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the most important job that you got. And
Yeah.
you can have all the money in the world, you can be famous and all that, but if you suck as a dad, you get no respect from me. So
Yeah.
it's the most important thing, and that's why I started my podcast. Because when you start a podcast, like what can you talk about all
Hmm.
the time? Well,
Yeah.
me, it's being a dad. So that's what that's how I that's what's that's what I when I think about being a dad, it's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. It was something similar for me when I started the Dad Cartel. It was thinking through. I've always wanted just to have something, right, and build and help people out in some kind of way. I never really thought about how I could do it until my wife got pregnant. I'm like, well, I need to become a better dad. I need to figure out how to do this, and I'm not going to figure it out on my own.
Right.
So I need to talk to people. I need to talk to men that are doing this, and not just any guy that's doing it and going through the motions, but men who are doing it successfully and what I think is successfully. And it's been such a blessing, man, to meet so many people like yourself who are dads and can pass on knowledge not just to me, but to everyone that's listening, right? Everyone that I can create clips for on TikTok or Instagram or wherever it goes, right?
Right.
It's been such a helpful kind of thing for me, and it's grown, right? Because there is an appetite for this. There are a
Right.
lot of men that have questions, whether you're a first time dad or you're a dad that has multiple kids. You have knowledge to pass on, and we can all learn something from one another. So it's been great, man. It's awesome to see that there's other people doing this too. It's not just me, and I don't feel like I'm the only one that has to kind of carry the torch, right?
Right. That's awesome. And for dads who like myself, you just want to hear things that you relate to. You just
Yeah,
want to be able to go to a podcast or a social media page and hear and see things that you can be like, oh yeah, yeah, I'm not wrong about that. He's
yeah.
going through that too. So yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, it's refreshing to see, right? Because there's so many different. I think women really have it down in the sense of what's it like to be a mother, what's it like to be a working mother, what's it like to be a stay-at-home mother. All these different women that are creating really good and
Right.
useful content. They've built different types of communities and micro communities. But as men, I think we're so in the weeds of providing and figuring out how to continue to provide and create new opportunities and keeping our family safe that we don't take a second to kind of stop and say, maybe there's someone else who has a better perspective on this. Maybe there's a man out there who has this more figured out than I do, and there's no one really kind of pulling us all together. There's some things out there where some guys are creating hats and some guys are creating things like that and merch and stuff like that. But the conversations I think of substance are lacking. And I was looking for a community to join, right? I didn't intend to create one. I just said, let me look if anyone's actually doing this, and they weren't. So I said, why not start it, right? And it's great to see you're having something similar. So I just encourage men to participate more in these communities and create your own. And there's so many niches in being a dad, and so many different things and so many unique perspectives that I don't feel like it's one person's to own. It's for all of us.
I agree. Yeah. When you sent me the message about being on your podcast, and I've seen your page, and it was like recommended to me. I was like, man, this is awesome, man. I love
Yeah,
it.
appreciate that.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Tell me, who were some of your dad role models growing up?
Man, my number one role model is my dad. That's where it all goes back to. That's where it all starts from. I wouldn't be the man that I am if it wasn't for him. So that's why being a dad is so important, because I feel like I was lucky to have a father like him, because either growing up, it was guys that I lived around who had fathers, but I could just tell that they weren't really involved in their sons' lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I could go to my dad and talk to him about anything. So it was just having him as a role model. I knew when I became a father, I had to do the same thing. It was easy for me to do the same thing.
Yeah,
So,
that's what a huge benefit, right? To have that awesome role model and to say, but this is a baseline and it's only up from here. And
right.
so many of us kind of strive for that, right? Whether it's we had that role model or we want to be that role model, but that thought process of if I have that baseline, it's only up from here. It can't be worse,
Right.
because it's unacceptable. And then if you never had that high standard, then reach that high standard and then pass that on to your generation, to the next generation that you create, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, with my sons, that, when they have sons, that they can be like, I have to be, you know, just as good as a father as my father was to me. I heard
Yeah.
something when somebody it was on TikTok, and it really hit me, struck me. He said that your father is the only man who really truly wants you to be better than him. And I was
Mhm.
like, wow,
Yeah.
it's true. I was like, that's
Absolutely.
true. That's true. So I was like, that's what that's why my podcast is about, is just showing fathers that, man, you are important.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody tell you that you're not.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
are, yeah.
Yeah, I know for sure. What were some of the things that your dad passed along? How did he make it easy for you to communicate with him? Because I know communication is a huge barrier sometimes, right, between son and father, because sometimes parents take the approach of, don't just listen to what I say, and that's it,
Right.
final kind of rule, right? And that doesn't always make for the best kind of relationship and opportunity for dialogue. So what was it about his kind of approach that made it easy to talk to him?
He would talk to me. He would talk to me. Not like not as like he would talk to me like I was an adult, but he would just give me the respect to tell me about things, um to listen. He would listen to
Hmm.
me, and I just felt like I can go to him and talk to him about things. I'm not gonna act like our relationship was always perfect. I
Yeah.
mean, but I still felt I could always talk to him. If something went wrong, I felt I could talk to him about it. Not
Yeah.
so much, I'm be honest, not so much my mother. I mean, because sometimes we, as sons, you don't want to tell your mother certain things. And you feel like, oh, she's not gonna understand. She's not
Yeah.
gonna, but I always felt like I could talk to him. And that's the way I want to be with my sons. That's the same way I want to be with my sons.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, because if kids don't get it from their father, right, that attention and that open dialogue, they're going to look for it somewhere else, and it's not always going to be the best person, right? I think
Mhm.
through how I grew up, and my dad didn't have that dialogue. We were a very traditional kind of Mexican family where it's like, do as I say, This is it. Don't question it. And so that's when I start turning to other people, right? Other people in the neighborhood, people who are older than me and in gangs, things like that, and
Right.
going down the wrong path in life. Because to me, I'm thinking, well, that guy's got it figured out. He has a car or something like that, right? Like, oh, he has a bunch of girls after that are always with him, right? Or he's making, what I'm thinking is money, right? That kind of thing. And kids look for that, right? They'll find someone to replace that role model that should be their dad, or supplement it. And that's the danger in not creating that opportunity for your kids to talk to you. And I'm with you 100%. I think it's absolutely crucial to create that room for conversation, even in those difficult kind of questions and conversations that kids may have.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, like I said, me and my dad, we didn't agree on everything because I remember it was a time he wanted, because he's my dad's 87 now, so
Okay.
they it was a time where parents thought if you went to college, everything was going to be, you're going to have this great life. But
Mhm.
college isn't for everybody.
Right.
It wasn't. It's not for everybody, and that was kind of like a fork in the road for me and him, because he was really, he was really wanted me to go to college and stuff like that. But for me, it didn't work. It just didn't work. So we kind of had a little rocky road right then, but we got over it. We
Yeah.
got over it.
Yeah.
And that's just how life is, man. But like you said, if you're looking up to the wrong people and your dad's not there, you can get some really bad information. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think are the qualities of a great dad? What makes a great dad?
I think the qualities of a great dad is being like empathetic, and being being almost like a coach, being able to see what your son or daughter, who they are, not who you want them to be, who they are, what they're good at, what they like to do, what they can excel at. That's what I think the a good dad can do. He can see that child and be like, okay, I know, I know the path that I should help you go down. And instead of just wanting them to be something that you want them to be.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the reason why I started my podcast, because I seen my son Carter was really, he had it. He could be in front of the camera. It was no big
Yeah.
thing to him. So,
Yeah.
so that's, and I got an older son. That's not really him. So
That makes a ton of sense, man. It's seeing and really paying attention to who your kids are, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what should they be focusing in on in terms of abilities and just natural kind of aptitude, right? And then trying to nurture that, because so
right.
many people try to live vicariously through their kids, and it's so dangerous, because at the very on I think on the low end you're going to build some resentment, or kids are going to build resentment for you. On the extreme end, it could lead to all sorts of things, right? Like just panic attacks and mental illnesses and things like that, and just resentment that takes them completely out of your life. So
Right.
it's incredible. I think you see it more with like athletes, and maybe like some kind of like I mean profession. Maybe like, take for instance, I don't know if your dad went to college and that's why he wanted you to go to college, right? And or maybe he just thought, I don't want my son to go down the road of working a hard laborious job. My dad was definitely like that, and he pushed me to college because of that. So there's a lot of things that it, for the most part, could be well intentioned, but at the end of the day it's going to have a negative impact on your kids if you're forcing something on them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. My dad wanted to go to college, but he wasn't able to. So I think that's what he wanted for his sons, and
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, you see it a lot with athletes. And I was just doing a podcast with one of my co-hosts, and I said
Mm.
that if you try to compare your child to something, you make comparisons, that's like the fastest way to get them to quit anything. You know, if you're saying, well, this person, they're trying to compare them to something, that's the fastest way to get them to say, I don't want to do it anymore. Because everybody wants to be seen as themselves. They want to. So I think that's what a good dad is able to do, that to be like, nope, your brother is good at this, but I think you're really good at this, and it's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
It's nothing wrong with that.
What's that saying? It's comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Yep.
I think that's how it goes, and it's spot on, because I talk through that with my wife all the time, and you know, I definitely catch myself with it, right? Whether it's saying, oh, look at that guy's in a brand new Bentley. I work in an area where, you know, a lot of, you see Ferraris and stuff like that, where it's a common thing. And I drive around in my truck, and I drive this Tacoma. It's 2020 Tacoma. It's basically brand new. And I have to catch myself, because then I'll say, what, at one point this truck was my dream truck, and it still is. I love it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's beautiful.
Right.
But when you start kind of comparing, whether it's yourself, your kids, anything like that, it's just going to lead you down this miserable path, and it's going to rob you of, you know, all the happiness that you have around you already.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a waste of time. You know,
It is.
It's a waste of time. You know, if the Tacoma is your dream truck, then yeah, I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you know, it's a great truck. So yeah, we all do it, compare ourselves to. I mean, just look at podcasts or social media, like, oh man, why I'm not getting this many views, or why.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time, man. Just, if you love doing what you do, just do it. Just do it. Just do it for that reason.
That's a great point. Speaking about your podcast, let's talk about it. How did it kickstart? You mentioned your son loves being in front of the camera, which is awesome for someone his age. So many people are so shy to do this. People are petrified to do it, period, or do any kind of public speaking. So tell me about it. How did it kickstart? You know, what's it like, and what's been your experience with it so far?
Well, actually, it started by like accident almost, because I was kind of like doing something to my website, and the designer was like, "Oh, we can add a podcast to it." I'm like, I don't want that. Like, kind of like underneath my breath, like, I don't need that. Like, why would you? But he added it anyway. Like, when he came with the final bill, I'm like, what's this extra? He's like, oh, I added the podcast. I'm like, dude, I was like, forget it, man. So I was like, well, I paid this extra $250 or whatever it was. I was like, I might as well use it. I might as well. So then I'm just thinking about, like, what could I do as a podcast? And I had some bad ideas before that. And then I was like, then I started kind of researching, like, what do people do? Like, how do they determine what they want to do a podcast about? And then it was like, well, something you could talk about even forever. That you don't get tired of talking about. And I was like, being a dad. And I was like, I could have my son, because he wants to be on YouTube. So I was like, me and him could do it together. And that's basically how it started.
That's awesome. Yeah, in an age where there's so much content, and it's hard to kind of decipher what to talk about. I always I was just talking to my wife about this too. The content that resonates with me is the content that's authentic. I could tell the person actually cares about it, and it's meaningful. There's something of substance to it too. There's a time and place. I'm no different than anyone else that likes laughing at like memes and things like that. But there's so many accounts and channels and things like that are dedicated to staging pranks and doing all this stuff, and just like, it's not for me, man. I like, if I'm not going to be reading books or trying to improve myself in some other kind of way, right, talking to someone in person and things like that, and meeting people, then I want to get something from it. I want to learn from it, right? Because otherwise I could be using that time more productively. And again, there's a time and place, I think, for entertainment and things like that. I try to balance it, but that's kind of where I landed too with Dad Cartel. And like, there's a huge need for this content. I think more than anything, we're living in such a time, and you tell me how you feel about this, where the role of dad has been minimalized, trivialized, just highly scrutinized, where all these op-eds coming out from women telling men how to be dads. And I I I find a big problem with that, because I know that they have good examples. They might have good examples of what a dad is and what a good man is, but they'll never be able to walk in those shoes in the same way that I'll never be able to tell a woman how to be a woman, right?
Right,
I
right.
wouldn't dare to tell a mother how to be a mother.
I agree. I totally agree. 100%. I was just talking about that, how women have platforms to talk
Mhm,
and say the things they want to say, and say the things about men and fathers, and some of the things we might not agree with.
mhm,
But they have the right to do it. And I feel like
mhm,
we have the right to do it too, and that we should do. Not enough men care about being men. It's like people, like, someone told me, they was like, "Whoa, you're really into this manhood thing." I'm like, "Well, aren't you?" Like, I,
right,
like you don't care about that either, about what's ahead for your son, or what's ahead for you as a man.
right,
So I agree. There's not a lot of places where you can hear stuff like
mhm,
this. So I think your podcast is needed. My podcast is needed, and is a and us coming together, talking,
yeah,
is awesome too. I think I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it goes back to people might take this mindset of, I want my podcast to be the only one, or I want to be the only one talking about this, or I want to be number one, and that kind of thing. And to me, there's more power in collaborating, because, like what you said, there's not a lot of this. There's not a lot of these conversations happening. I
No,
mean, I've probably seen, maybe I'm seeing more and more, but maybe like 12, a dozen maybe at most. There might be more, but I don't think it's a negative thing if there's more of us talking about it, right? And I feel like we're way behind on it, and we have
yeah,
so much ground to cover, that the more content we can put out, not just individually but together,
yeah,
it's only going to benefit the next generation, right? The current generation, us as dads. And so we're playing catch up, and we got to do it quick.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I was watching. It was a lady entrepreneur, and she was giving like a speech to somebody, and a guy stood up, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to do more things for women and stuff like that." And she was like, "We don't need you to do anything for us." She
Yeah,
was like, "Do more stuff for men."
yeah,
And I was like, wow, I was like, I gotta give a salute her for that, because he was like,
yeah,
we're us as women, we're good. We don't need
yeah,
you to do anything for us. She was like,
yeah,
we need you as a man to make content and do things for men.
right.
And I was like, she's 100% right.
Yeah,
She's
I
100%
love
right.
what you said about I love what you said about that person that told you, like, you're really into that manhood thing, and you push back on, why aren't you? You're a man,
Yeah,
aren't you? All right.
yeah, yeah,
Why is it such a taboo thing, or why do people take this approach of it? It's a negative thing, right? The the whole idea of trying to attach toxicity
uh,
to being a man is ridiculous, because there's nothing wrong with being a man. And it's, in fact, we all need to embrace. I know I've embraced it since I was,
yes, sir.
a boy. And I think what people try to attach to it are, to being a man and embracing masculinity, is shitty behavior, right? And shitty behavior isn't exclusive to men, because I've seen it in women too.
Yes,
So
sir. Yep,
so
yep.
it's two completely different things. And that's why, like you, I'm really unapologetic about talking about it and embracing it, and getting more people to try to talk about it, because it's absolutely essential.
I agree. We thinking alike here, brother, because I it's nothing wrong with us embracing being a man. And like you said, um they try to attach it to shitty behavior. Well,
Mhm.
that's that guy. That's not me.
Mhm.
That's that guy that's a deadbeat. That's not me. So,
Right.
or that's that guy who wants to, solve everything with violence, or who,
Mhm.
who's abusive. That's that person. That's not
Yeah.
all men. Don't just
Right.
And if we, are proud of being men and want to talk, want to help other young men to better themselves or any issues they have. Up, look, you're just past you. Somebody actually even called me was like, well, his content is kind of chauvinistic. It's like, I'm like, I'm like, that's your opinion, but I'm not sure. I'm not,
Yeah.
but they try to, they almost like victimize themselves when, with what you're saying. It's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not putting down women at all. I have daughters. I have a wife. I'm not doing that. I'm just being a man, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, just because it doesn't fit this kind of new narrative that's trying to be pushed about men, then it's it's toxic, it's bad, it's whatever it might be. But that's not what it is. And I think somewhere along the way, people really got away from intention and trying to take people at their word and trying to understand for the sake for the sake of understanding rather than for the sake of responding.
Right.
And that's where the disconnect comes, because someone hears me say the word masculine or masculinity and they're like, oh, that's bad. Oh no, he's trying to raise his kids to fight or to be abusive towards women or whatever, right? Might be this weird kind of whatever media might put out there. And that's not what it is at all. And people are honestly too lazy now, or don't have the attention span to try to actually hear people out and understand what their message is.
Yes.
And that's the problem, right? There isn't any actual research being done, or even just basically listening to the true message. And that's the huge problem with a lot of what's going on, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Just, you can't, like I said, you can't judge a book by its cover. You gotta really, before you just name call and you just say you don't like somebody, you didn't like what he said, it hurt your feelings. Is that it? Is that why you don't like? Was it true?
Yeah.
The truth hurts. A lot of
Yeah.
times that's what it is. I mean, he's gone, Kevin Samuels, but I didn't agree with everything he said, but a lot of times he was saying stuff that was true. He was saying stuff that was true, and a lot of women didn't like it, but it was because the way he was saying.
Yeah.
It was because the way he was, and they automatically turned him off. Automatically, but like, is he lying? Yes, but so that's but I think that's another thing where fathers come in handy at because when you're dealing with your daughters and stuff. Well, I'm not gonna always say things that you like to hear, but if you never came across that, if you never came across that in your life, you're gonna jump to a lot of conclusions.
Yeah. That's a big issue, I think. What do you think? What do you think's a mistake that you've made as a dad, and how did you fix it? What's something that stands out for you? Because just as well as I do, we're all flawed. None of us are perfect. But what's something that stood out to you as a learning experience as a dad?
Something that stood out. I think what stood out to me is once my youngest daughter was born, is just that how sons, you do want them to be a better version of you. So, but once you have a daughter, they just grab your heart, and they just grab your heart, and you want to protect them. You want, and that just really taught me something. Like, okay, there's different sides of parenting. Having a son and parenting a son is a lot different than parenting a daughter as a father. And just emotionally it's different. And so that really opened my eyes to even parenting my son. Like, okay, you take it easy a little bit. Take it easy a little bit, and just she kind of really softened me up a little bit, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that your daughters forced you to learn emotional intelligence a little bit more? And it sounds like that kind of translates to your other kids. Was that the case?
Yeah. Can you? I couldn't hear you. What did you say?
I mentioned, do you think that having daughters forced you to pick up more emotional intelligence or focus more in on that?
Oh yeah, because you you can't be a big bully with your dog. You can't, you can't do that. You can't
Yeah.
do that. Sometimes you have to put your foot down. I understand, but you're not gonna 90% of the time you just can't do it. You just
Yeah.
don't have the strength to do it. But so
Yeah.
um it taught me that, like, okay, you gotta ease up. Maybe you can ease up on your son a little bit too, just
Yeah.
having a daughter. So yeah, that really like I said, they soften you up, and
Hmm.
it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah. I tell my wife all the time that to me it was a blessing for us to have, or for me more so, to have a daughter first. We
Right.
have a 10-month-old daughter. It's our first. And I said I needed that as a dad because I don't know. I feel I would have figured it out with the son, but I feel like I would have been a lot harder than I
Mhm.
will be now if I have a son, because I've learned so much about kids now, and I feel like, and obviously there's still a ton to learn, but for me, it was more the softening, right? For me, it was just saying, I can't even get like upset with with her. I told my wife, I like she's gonna be the one that has to discipline her, because for me it's gonna be a firm voice and giving the scary face, and that's probably gonna be that's it. That's all I'm gonna have. And once she calls that bluff, then
Yeah, yeah.
it's up to my wife to take it from there. So you know from that standpoint, I think through I don't know how I would have been with the son, and I feel like now I have this different perspective of there is another approach rather than getting angry or yelling or being firm 100% of the time. Now I know there's a lot more flexibility there, and it doesn't have to be all kind of firmness and strictness.
Yeah, I agree that you're 100% right. They teach you that. Your
Mm.
daughters teach you that, because you can't be that way with them. You
Hmm.
can't be, you know, you can't be literally, you can't be that way, and emotionally you can't be that way, because you're gonna
Yeah.
feel terrible. You're gonna feel terrible about yourself if you are. So
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. Mine's came a little different, but that's one thing I learned about just being a parent, that um you can you don't always have to be, you gotta kind of learn, is kind of walk a fine line in between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. What how what's your support system as a dad, and how important is that to you? I know we talked about it a little bit, how you have the podcast. Sounds like you have some co-hosts. Do you get together with other dads? Do you talk to other dads? Who are the people that you go to when you have questions?
um uh honestly, I don't really, I think the podcast really helped me out with that a lot, just being
Mhm.
able to get stuff off my chest and all out of my head.
Yeah.
So um I really don't have a lot of people, and I think that's a lot of guys have that issue.
Mhm.
Because everybody does things different. When some guys aren't honest about
Yeah.
the way things go down in their house, they want to make it seem like they run things undeniably, and it's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
No, you don't, man. Like, and I can't even talk to you anymore, bro,
Yeah.
because you acting like, and I know that's not the case.
Yeah.
So I think doing a podcast helped me meet new people. Like, I
Yeah.
meet, meeting yourself. I'm meeting. I think meeting new people and being able to talk to new people. So I think the podcast helped me out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the same thing with this of, I think you're now my 18th guest, and there was a few that I had to pull just because it was some like technical issues, but probably about 20 people I've talked to so far, 20 different dads. And man, it's been amazing. I feel like I've picked up so much, so many tips, so many different perspectives. I've heard everything from, I'm a high level executive dad that takes the big vacations with my family, and I have this kind of very structured lifestyle, to all the way from I was a single dad and I raised 3 kids on my own. Their mom walked out on them, and everything in between. And it's awesome. It's awesome to hear that the one commonality I found through talking to each and every dad is this really genuine love for their kids. I don't think any single person I've talked to has faked it. And from my perspective, it's this genuine kind of, I love my kids, and this is why I love my kids. And it's so refreshing to hear dads just talk about it, because for a long time, at least like my dad's generation and older generations, they didn't talk about that, right? Maybe in private they would talk to say, either I love you, or even probably something more like nice job, kid, or something like that, right? It was never this dialogue of men talking about, hey, I actually love my kids and I don't give a shit who knows it, right? Like I'm proudly love my kids. And it's so cool. And that's what I kind of took away from this, of there are a ton of other men, good men out there, great dads out there. And by connecting with them, it's just going to build so much more positivity, I think.
Oh yes, I agree. I mean, it helps us as individuals, and it helps the listeners,
Yeah.
to to see that, like you said, there's so many dads out there who really do genuinely care about their children and being a dad, and
Mm.
wanting other dads to know that you're important, because
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, if you're not married and you don't have someone who's really in your corner or helping you raise your kids, you can feel like you're not important. You
Yeah.
can feel that it's you against the world. And so it's it's important for you to keep doing what you're doing, and me to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think are some of the highs and lows of being a dad?
Some of the highs are when your kids, tell you that they love you. It's like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, hearing that, you never get tired of hearing that,
Yeah.
and or my son Cardi telling me he loves me all the time, and like I said, I think it wasn't really easy for me,
Mm.
it wasn't really easy for me to say, you know, but I say it because I don't want to make him feel like, well, I don't want to say it anymore, or
Yeah.
so. And like, some of the lows is just how um I think sometimes men get treated when you're not with the right person. You have children with the wrong person, and you have children and the relationship doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, how you can? I hear so many men who's like, "Well, she's not letting me see him or her," and man, that hurts, man. I think that's some of the lows, the lows when you can't be involved in your kid's life just because the relationship between you and their mother didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always a shame to see that, right? Because at the end of the day, the kids are the ones that really suffer, right? The
Yeah,
dad will suffer 100%, but the kids will suffer worse. And I've seen that firsthand from some family members, and it's brutal, man.
yeah.
I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I
No,
wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
nope.
And it's so tough to think about. And I hope that I'm seeing more and more content out there. There's a female lawyer that talks about it. I posted some clips of her. Forget her name, but it's on my TikTok and Instagram. But she does a really good job kind of talking about how the uh, the court system, the family court system, is just heavily stacked against dads, and it's brutal when you see men. And I've seen so many comments on these videos saying, I spent $20,000, I spent $30,000 just to try to get my son and try to get some kind of rights, and didn't get anything. At the end of the day, they're still at the mercy of this kind of kangaroo court, essentially. And it's something that needs to really be talked about. Definitely
Right.
once I get one thing I would like to do is once I get some more resources and hopefully some lawyer listeners, right, some attorney listeners on here, is try to create some resources for men to try to get some of those rights back, because it's important. Dads are essential, and I think that's where all of us that feel passionately about this should be collaborating and trying to figure this out, because just because we may not be in that situation doesn't mean that a family member couldn't, or a friend,
Right.
or just even our neighbor, right? Any person that we would care about, or even random strangers, we should feel empathy for these men that are going through this.
I agree. And I always tell dads when I hear about that, it's like, bro, don't give up, because
Mhm.
um it's that that mother is eventually gonna want to send that son back,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she
Sons
she
especially.
yeah, because she doesn't know what she's in. She's what she's got ahead of herself. She's
Yeah.
emotional now, but
Mhm.
he's coming back your way if you just
Yeah.
don't, so don't give up on him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think especially when boys hit those teenage years, right? The dads are, you could argue, I mean, I would argue dads are crucial and essential throughout the whole life of any kid, but especially when you talk about boys, I think I try to like reflect back when I was a young boy. That's such a pivotal moment, and you're all sorts of things are going through your head. You're learning about sex, you're learning about work and careers and all these different things, and again, you might get the wrong advice from the wrong person and go down a wrong path. And it's as simple as that, not having the dad around to provide some kind of guidance. And it doesn't have to be that way. And obviously there's situations where it's absolutely not beneficial for a dad to be around, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a dad who has a career, or is trying his best, has some stability in his life, and wants to be there.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we're not talking about, like you said, a dad who shouldn't be around, his kid because he just doesn't deserve to. We're talking about a dad who wants to. So
Mhm.
I'm never gonna side with the fact that he can't, he shouldn't be there.
Mhm.
If he wants to be there, and and he's a stand-up guy, his
Mhm.
son or daughter needs him.
Yeah.
And I'm always gonna be fighting for that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to first time dads? I know for me it was, I didn't know what I knew, and I thought, in your head, I went into it knowing this is gonna be hard. You don't know how hard it's gonna be until you go through it, right? And obviously I'm gonna keep learning the different kinds of levels of challenges, and uh different kind of things that I'll have to adapt to or overcome. So what are some things that you think first time dads should know?
Uh, First time dad should know that it's it's a marathon, man. Like it's definitely a marathon, and you you're gonna change. You're gonna make a lot of mistakes. You're gonna and you're gonna change as a person and as a dad, but you you just gotta be patient. You gotta patience is the key. You gotta be patient, and you wanna find out who your son and daughter is. And it's not you,
Mhm.
they're just a part of you, you know. So don't, like you said, don't push all the things that you didn't do in life on them, you know, and
Mhm.
let them be, let them be who they want to be. But like my dad told me, like, if you're doing the right thing, I'm gonna help you. If you're doing the right thing, son, I'm gonna help you. But if you're doing the wrong thing, you don't have my help. And
Yeah.
so that's what I will. That's the information I will. If if they're trying to be the best version of themselves, man, you got to just be there for them.
Yeah.